Shalom, shalom. Hayom ze Yud Gimel Av. Aval hashela etzli yesh kochavim ve'etzlechem yesh shemesh. Lama? Ki etzli ani לדאבוני, אני בחוץ לארץ, וכתב לי ליורי שהוא אומר שיש, ברוך הבא לאמריקה, אני אמרתי שאני בגלות, אבל בגלות יש לגלות. זאת אומרת, אני בגלות, I'm in exile, but we have the ability to enlighten. It's dark out tonight, but we're going to enlighten it with Divrei Torah. And I have the presence of Baruch Hashem, my grandchildren. I'm staying at my daughter Racheli, and I have Binyamin, Yitzchak, who anybody checks out Benjamin Yitzchak Werner on Spotify, you're going to find something very interesting. And then we have Meira here talking about bringing light into the world in the middle of the night. We have Meira. And I wanted them to join me because today we just got off the plane and we don't have I'm going to be the one driving, so it's hard for me to drive and give a shir at the same time. I could get arrested. Anyway, Achshav, Yom HaYartzeit, Yud Gimel Av. I thank, again, as always, I thank Yuri, who I will make sure that the daf gets published so everybody could see it. And whose Yartzeit is it today? It is
the Magale Amukos.
The Magale Amukos. Okay, which means to reveal deep thoughts. Magale Omek is something that's deep, right? Mira?
Yep.
Amuk. Anyway, so Megale is to, as I said before, Galut is Legalot. So Megale Amukot, Rab Nasan Nota Shapiro. It's interesting because I do have, my father-in-law was known as Nasan Nota. I actually had both names Nati. And my son, Natan, is also, we call him Natan, he really has this name Nata. So here it's Nasan Nata, Ben Shlomo Shapiro, and Nolad Krakow. He was born in Krakow, which is in Poland, Beshnat 1585. V'niftar, and he died on Yud Gimel Av, which is today's date, the 13th day of Av, 1633. Achshav, Beshnat 1617, he was appointed the Rav and Rosh Yeshiva of Krakow. And one of his students, his famous students, Haya Reb Shabtai Cohen. Shabtai Cohen is the initials, Rashi Tevos, Shach. And the Shach is known as a great commentator on Shulchan Aruch. So the Shach and the Taz. So one of the great Talmidim of the Megala Amukos is the Shach. Shach hayulo kishronot mitzuyonim. The Shach had great abilities. Miuchad zichron bilti matzui. And in English we would say a photographic memory. Now, do you know anybody who has a photographic memory? For real? Do you know anybody?
Didn't your father have photographic memory?
Halavai, he had a little.
I think that's what I remember hearing.
I would say Rav Naftali Yeager, my Rosh Yeshiva at Shar Yoshuv, really has great recall, and a lot of the tzaddikim. I mean, Reb Chaim and Reb Moshe Feinstein, Gedolim by definition would have a tremendous recall. Some people say it's not just photographic memory, it's the gius to amelus b'Torah, by just going over and over, like they say, learning 101 times is not like learning 100 times. In other words, even the difference between 100 and 101 makes a difference in terms of retention. Today's word for everybody to look for is retention, retention. Be'ivrit maza retention. Okay, now, that's what we do every day in this year. Akshav, he had a photographic memory, Rabbi Natan Nata Haya Merishonei Hamakubolim B'Polani. He was one of the foremost Kabbalists in Poland. Yichusu lo Gilui Eloyo Hanavi. So for you might not have heard this before. There's an expression, Gilui Eliyahu, that famous personality, Tzadikim, had the revelation of Eliyahu Hanavi, the Eliyahu Hanavi appeared. So you do know. Mm-hmm. You know any specific person? Do you remember who had Gilui Eliyahu?
No, I remember learning about it. But like different stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the Megala Amukos was a Makubal, and he allegedly had Gilui Eliyahu. Now, his most, as I've been saying over and over, many authors, like the Chavetz Chaim, is known. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan was known for his work, the Chavetz Chaim. So there are people who call Rav Nosson not the Shapiro. They didn't even know his name. They know him as the Megala Amukos. So the Megala Amukos, the Sefer, was min hachashuvim shebesifrei Kabbalah Ashkenazim, was of the great Ashkenazic Kabbalistic books. Met sheyesh habe sifrei mekubalim me'esfardim, many Sephardic works, but this is an Ashkenazic one. Boi Piresh, Achar Hakdam. Now this is having to do with this week's coming parsha. Now we're even Steven between Israel and Israel was ahead, but we got caught up. So now I'm going to ask if you know offhand this coming week's parsha, which happens to be my Bar Mitzvah parsha. Is Veschanan. Okay, so now the Megala Amukos brings something just to give you a taste of his derech. Bohu Piresh Acharei Hakdama Gdola Shel Shloshim Dapim. In his massive introduction to his Sefer Megala Amukos Ala Torah, he wrote 30 pages on what? On the word V'eschanan, the idea of V'eschanan, which means many words in English, mostly having to beseech, pray, V'eschanan, and he says, 250 ofanim shonim, different types of interpretation. Keneged Rav Loch. Rav Loch means you should have a certain number. What does that mean? Rav Loch, the Gematria, Rav Loch is 252. So he had 252 different interpretations of the word V'eschanan. Gadol Yakocho b'Gematria is Merkovos. So we see that it's not so simple, especially you could come up with your own interpretations, but to have accepted interpretations, to look for V'eschanan. We all know that V'eschanan is Gematria 515 times. He tried. If he would have said 515, HaKadosh Baruch said, Rav Loch, we're not getting to this week's parsha, but we see that the Megala Amukos was able to go deep into different interpretations. Now, Gam Hashem HaMagalos Katuv Al Derech Apshat. He also not only was Kabbalistic, but he also just gave simple interpretation. He also wrote on Halacha Chidushe Anshe Shem, which is on the Rif, and it appears at the end of many Masechtas, of the common Masechtas. And they can go on and on for those who, again, want to read some very interesting stories, a very fascinating story that's brought down that Rabbi Yuri included. I'm asking Yuri to publish the page. So we have already put in 9 minutes on the introduction from Chutz La'aretz again, from New York, from Lawrence, New York. We are continuing Perek Yud Gimel, Maxane Israel. What we're learning is a work of the Chavetz Chaim written specifically for soldiers, to how to deal when the Russian army, how to keep the Yiddishkeit under very difficult circumstances. So, we were just finishing yesterday. We also hurried at the end. We wanted to say that people get tremendous schar, a tremendous reward for learning Torah, and those who do prevent themselves from learning Torah, unfortunately, could be consumed Who betochim memale mamuvan onesh adam ha'ozev haTorah alav nemar va'ozve Hashem yachulu. Yeshayahu, that's Isaiah, first chapter, pasuk Chav Ches, that it says that those who leave the Torah, who abandon, who forsake the Torah, are unfortunately can suffer destruction. And it says, Oy la'osa busha, a woe is to that shame. Oy la'osa chlima, woe is to that disgrace. And I gave you homework yesterday. I know I was flying over the oceans, and I didn't get any answer. I'm going to ask one more time. What is the difference? Ma ech lechalek ma muvan meben busha v'chlima. What is the difference between shame and disgrace? Would you know offhand if I told you shame and disgrace offhand? What would you say, Binyamin, is the difference between the words? There are synonyms. They're very much Shem Torah. But what would you say difference between shame and disgrace is?
I don't know.
Come on.
It's very difficult.
Difficult. Come on.
You're putting us on the spot.
That's exactly what I do. That's what your grandfather's for. Would you say shame has something to do internal and disgrace is external, how you appear in front of others? Would you say?
I'd be okay with the answer.
With that? Okay, so we'll find out. I'm giving a hint. I want some real homework. I want Makorot. Perhaps I would refer you to the Malbim. So Shmuel, Yuri, Elisha, come up. Let's see if you can answer. Oyla osa busha, oyla osa chlima. Ma yasa adam liyom ha'pekuda. Like the day of judgment. What happens to the person on the appointed day? Hayesh kates la'onsho. In other words, it's so bad, the punishment, is there an end to all his suffering? Just like there's endless reward, there's unfortunately endless punishment. Od amru chazal, kol amarape atzmo medivrei Torah. Whoever is lax. We talked about the previous chapters of Lehit Rachel, to be lazy. Now we talk about marapeh means to weaken. Whoever, instead of being chizuk, to be machazik themselves in learning Torah, whoever is lax, midivrei Torah, ein bo koach la'amod b'yom tzara. He will not have the strength to withstand the day of judgment, or the day of travail. Shenemar, hisrapeh b'yom tzara, tzar kochacha. And it's brought down in the Gemara. It's brought down Yeshayahu. I think I brought down. No, Mishlei Chav Daled Yud. Okay, so Kol Marapa Etzmo Medivrei Torah Ein Bo Kol Chalam Yom Sora. Shenemar Israpa B'Yom Sora Tzar Kochacha. Isa. Now we're going to end off with the Zohar. Did you ever learn the Zohar at all? I'm sure you heard of it.
I've heard.
But you never learned
from him, but I never.
That would be scary.
I don't think I'm qualified.
Well, they say that people should start learn Kabbalah at the age 40, but 40 is not a chronological age. That's the way I interpret it. It says, Ben Chamesh Lemikra, 5-year-old, for learning Chumash, and then Mishnah and Talmud, how old for Gemara. If you could finish Mishnah, all Mishnahs, and no Talmud, then you could start learning the Pardes, you could start learning Sod, Kabbalah. It says, Visa Bezorah Kodesh, ala Pasuk, is that. On this Pasuk, Hisrapa B'yom Tzar Kochacha, Zelashono, Beshata de B'nei Ben Adam. And at the time when a person, a human being, Isrape Miraisa, is lazy, is lax in his learning Torah, va'azil ba'orchen delok sherim, and goes in the ways that are not really kosher. Kama bali devavo dizmini lekabli lemiyo lev ketoria. They will unfortunately be prosecuted. The word categoria means to be a prosecute, and sanagoria means to be a defense. Do you ever hear that expression?
Right.
Exactly. Oh, beautiful, Meira. You know exactly. Afilu nishmata dvar nashti mili delay Imar devova lekable dechsiv sara kochacha. Hisprape man demrape yade mikuch bricho. A person who is lazy and lax in his learning before Kadosh Baruch Hu, the lo is ispakte Kadosh Baruch Hu, and we say shalo mischazik. He's not mischazik before Kadosh Baruch Hu. He doesn't strengthen himself before Kadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'ech yochol barnash liskafe bebe Kadosh Baruch Hu. How can someone be mechazik before Kadosh Baruch Hu? Man de atke paraisa atke bilana de chaye v'yahav tokfe l'shchinte. So we see this is all in Aramaic, and the Zohar is Lashon, and I looked up the Zohar Maturgam, and he brings down ve'ech yagzik adam yagzik b'Torah magzik be'etz hachayim. The way that a person could be, how could he get himself mischazik? What kind of chizik do you have? Only by learning, by machzik be'etz hachayim, by holding on, by strengthening the etz hachayim. Kav yochol, no tein chizik l'knesset Yisrael. It's as if you give strength, which is Hashem is omnipotent, is all powerful. How could you give strength? So we use it as a phrase, kaviyachol, as if when you learn Torah, you give strength to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And kama singarim ilmi olav l'ashri l'shem. V'kama singarim kayaman olei, the akri le litavye, l'haskir l'shev. And how many defense attorneys, so to speak, how many defenders there will be to represent you before Hashem Yisborach. If you don't learn Torah, then chas v'sholom, the enemies will rise up against us. And because it is already over 15 minutes, it's over 17 minutes. We are at this hour, which is 11:05, which is 11:05 p.m. in Israel, which is 6:05 p.m. We finish davening around this time at the Nates, and I usually record this on the way back from the Kotel. So here, this is the virtual ride, and I thank both my grandchildren, Binyamin and Meira, for participating, and everyone should have, I wish the locals a good night, and I wish those in Eretz Yisrael have a good morning.